Welcome to our Assembly Conversation series presented by Business and Arts South Africa, themed Creativity Now, Cultural Intelligence in the Time of COVID-19. BASA Assembly explores the insights cultural intelligence can offer in terms of rebooting the creative economy in South Africa, on the continent and globally. This is the next episode in a series of curated conversations flowing from assembly.basa.co.za, a hybrid of live and digital engagements across social, digital and media platforms. Our episode today, Less Duplication and More Collaboration, sees our host Charmaine Subramani unpack the role of systematic and international collaboration with Tamara Gers, writer, designer, eco-thinker and co-founder of Flying House, and Marcus DeSando, CEO of the Arts and Culture Trust.
Welcome to another insightful episode in the BASA Assembly Conversation series. I am Charmaine Subramani, a non-executive director on the board of Business and Arts South Africa, focusing on current cultural policy and cultural investment. The BASA Assembly Conversations are a series of podcast debates and discussions stemming from the inaugural BASA Assembly, which launched in March 2021 and was partnered by the British Council. For those who missed it or want to continue engaging with the content, the BASA Assembly online platform is still live and can be accessed at assembly.basa.co.za. This monthly conversation series is focused on the current cultural landscape. It emphasizes responsibility on both business and the arts to effect decisive changes for growth in and for both sectors. The high levels of unemployment and the ripple effect on the lives should be a serious concern for all of us living in South Africa. Intentional collaboration for growth and advancement, and the effective and intentional use of the available resources to drive the desired outcome and impact for self, community, country, and global reach should be prioritized and top of mind for more of us. You would often hear me saying, we need all the talent and people to pull South Africa through the current phase we find ourselves in. Today, we delve into the topic of less duplication, more collaboration. From programming to audience engagements to funding opportunities, in today's conversation, we will unpack current barriers to collaboration and explore collective value creation, building ecosystems through strength mapping and systematic collaboration. We will also look at meaningful ways in which entities and individuals might maximize the inherent synergies towards a more effective use of resources, wider beneficiary reach, and overall value of the cultural sector. Unpacking this topic with me today, we have Tamara Gers and Marcus DeSando. Welcome, Tamara and Marcus. Thank you for lending your voice to this very important conversation. Tamara, writer, designer, eco-thinker, and co-founder of Flying House. Outside your public persona, who are you really? And how you and your organization Flying House impact lives? Please share with us.
Hi, and thanks so much to BASA for inviting this conversation. So outside of my public persona, well, I identify as a writer and I suppose an artist. I am a freelancer, a committed freelancer, and I end up, as many freelance creatives do, doing a lot of different types of things, so I kind of, I've sometimes described myself as a pollinator because I sort of hop between different organizations doing jobs for, different spaces, but within arts education and theatre, those are kind of my two main things. And behind my public persona, I guess, well, I'm someone who is very much interested in nature, and that's why I call myself an eco-thinker. I grew up in a wilderness area, so that's a very big part of how I understand the world. Flying House is an organization that I started with some like-minded people some years back. And Flying House impacts the world, I think, by, well, we design spaces, experiences, and processes that help people to connect create, innovate, and grow. That's how we've kind of whittled down our niche, if you like.
Fabulous. Clearly, collaboration is part of your DNA, so that's wonderful to know. Marcus, CEO of the Arts and Culture Trust, and I have no doubts, which I've listened to, a phenomenal singer. Outside of that, who are you really? What is the mandate of Arts and Culture Trust, and how does your organization impact and influence lives in the creative sector? So give it to us, Marcus.
Well, thank you so much, Charmaine, and thank you to BASA for really starting this very important conversation today, and I'm really very honored to be part of it. Who am I really? I'm very complex in a lot of ways, because I don't seem to know how to take a break. So I take on a lot of things that are very satisfying to me. I'm a producer, I am a mentor, I am a director. I sometimes teach people how to sing. I don't sing as much as I used to be. So thank you so much for that compliment, Charmaine. But in really what drives my everyday activities is really as an administrator. And so besides that, on a personal note, I have a vision of myself of seeing how I could impact the creative sector in as positive way as possible, because I'm a product of the creative industries, and all I've ever done my whole life was really work within the industry. So I really feel quite indebted to giving back. And so that's what drives me every day. My work at ACT is at the moment quite exciting. We have, as you might have heard or seen, that we have launched a new strategy, and we have, as an organization, really moved away from being a grant maker to focusing on skills development, entrepreneurial development, and I think that's what really drove the kind of interest from Dumi that she was talking about. And also we wanted to see how we can start impacting lives beyond just giving money, but how we can help them look at creating sustainable futures for themselves. So that's really quite important for us. All the programs that we have as an organization are geared towards not giving people access to money, but giving them access to knowledge, giving them access to opportunities that will enable them to plow back into the communities and really think around how they can thrive as creatives. I wanted to say that, we don't want to assume that we are making a difference right now. We aspire to be making a difference with this new strategy that's going to hopefully in the next 5 years, when we look back, that we see much more able, much more confident, much more monetizing creative sector. So I think in all, we aspire to create more entrepreneurial thinkers and individuals that will look beyond just seeking a handout, but also how they can change the world.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you, Marcus. It's clear to me that we have two fascinating speakers to contribute to the discussion today, because what I'm hearing and from what you've shared is you have quite a breadth of knowledge, experience, and insights to really impact and influence the discussion today, but also have and contribute to the sustainability of the creatives in our sector. So I'm very, very excited to just unpack a few more of those pearls of wisdom that you have to share. So we all can acknowledge the fact that there's clearly duplication in our industry, right? And that's a fact. I would love for you to, and I'm going to start with you tomorrow, to paint us a picture or talk us through what could be a cohesive and complementary relationship between the cultural organizations and the agencies in the creative space.
Goodness, it's such a big question. And I wonder if you would mind me just taking a tiny little step backwards, or
absolutely,
just to think of this idea of an ecosystem. And I just have a little bit of thinking that I would love to sort of put out there and share a little bit. around, we're throwing this word ecosystem around a lot at the moment. It's a kind of a buzzword. And I've been really delving into thinking about, well, what do we mean by ecosystem? Like, if we're going to be saying ecosystem, what does this mean? And if we, so I started thinking about it, and there's these different sort of principles of ecology. And one of them, well, one of the most important ones that we would think of is what you're calling collaboration, which others might call partnerships. And I think that that's really important. And also to think of things like resource flows. But when it came to duplication, I was really thinking about some of the examples of organizations I've worked with. And I liked to think, I think of this idea of the niche, right? So in ecosystems, organisms develop according to the niche they're in, according to the specific requirements of their environment. And I think that that has happened a lot. And I'm thinking, okay, from an arts education perspective, you've got a few providers who are doing really incredible work in arts education. There's Assetej, there's the lab, obviously, the Sibiqua, there's Drama for Life, Hillbrow Theatre, I don't know where that stands at the moment, but there's all these different examples, and they've all adapted to their particular niche. And in that way, they're not necessarily duplicating their work, but there's definitely opportunity for more partnership and more collaboration in order to replicate the kind of work that they do, which is so important in other ecosystems, if you like. But
Tamara, I'm just going to interject for a point of clarity. So in your view, are you saying that you do not believe there's a lot of duplication?
I think I'm getting to that. I think in terms of so looking at it then from another point of view, from perhaps the kind of funding opportunities that are out there, it does feel as if at the moment there's a lot of emphasis, because there is such a need, as Marcus has described, a lot of emphasis on entrepreneurial thinking and skills development and skills training. And so this is one of the things that Flying House offers is, using design thinking to help creatives really professionalize their hustles, if you like. And then I was wondering, well, sure, is this a duplication? And yes, I think in a way it is, but I also think it's evolved in its own particular unique way. So I'm interested in what these duplications are and in mapping them. And I think that would be the first thing to answer your broader question. Is the first thing would be to really map and understand how have these smaller organizations responded to specific needs in their communities.
Thank you, Tamara. So clearly what I'm going to take out of the point that you've made is that there are some levels of duplication. There's a need for mapping of the ecosystem. And what I'm going to do is just hand over or draw Marcus into the conversation. Marcus, I would love to hear your thoughts on the same question. What could a cohesive and complementary relationship between cultural organizations and agencies look like, in your view?
Yeah, I thank you. It is a very difficult question to respond to, but I want to take us a step back, very similarly to what Tamara did now, and remind ourselves that in the advent of democracy, the issue around South Africa's needs was around funding. And so there were a lot of funding bodies that were created to create opportunities for funding. And right now, our current contextual challenges is skills development. And so in that sense, the response by a lot of development agencies in South Africa has shifted towards skills development. It is not necessarily because we are duplicating, but it's because we see that there is a need for more knowledgeable administrators, creators in the sector beyond just throwing money at them. So it is, yes, there is duplication of some kind, especially between BASA and ACT, because we do have quite similar programs. But the question that needs to be asked is that, are we serving the same individuals? Are we saving the same community? Are we saving the same level of people? And I think what partnerships and collaborations would look like is, firstly, for all of us, similarly to what Tamara said, which is important, the mapping is understanding the sector, understanding who the players in the sector are, that we will then devise the programs to serve. Do we understand as much as we think we do? Do we really understand the needs of the sector in terms of what could be immediately created to impact their lives? So, I mean, instead of answering, I just throw a question right out there, because I think that's really what we as ACT are trying to do now, is to ask those kind of questions. Is do we understand the people? Do we have enough research on the creatives themselves, what their needs are? And I'll give you an example of this. 2 years ago, we did a road show at the Arts and Culture Trust, where we went throughout the country asking, trying to understand our stakeholders. And what came out of it was that a lot of stakeholders were, at the time, quite happy with funds that they were receiving, however minuscule they might be from organizations like ours. But what they lacked was the skills to use those funds as effective as possible. And the zeitgeist right now is, how do we create able administrators? And for me, that is not duplication. That is real response to a real problem in the country.
Thank you. Thank you for the share. There's 2 points there's a lot that you've said that was extremely useful, but the 2 points that stood out for me was the fact that there's an acknowledgement of a duplication of service between BASA and ACT. The fact that we're at that stage where we can acknowledge there is, and it's going to lead us to the next process to map out to see how best we utilize our very limited resources to have a greater impact and greater reach, because that's what we want to actually achieve. In terms of the limited resources that we face individually as well as organizations. Would that not be an ideal situation? And this is both to Tamara and Marcus, an acknowledgement, an understanding as to what the duplications are and how we effectively utilize the limited resources to drive impactful, sustainable and meaningful change, right? That's why we here, in addition to other things.
If I may answer that, I'm sorry, Tamara, if I may answer that quickly. You're absolutely right. I think the idea is we need to be able to understand each other's role in the ecosystem as organizations much clearer. So it's not just about pushing collaboration, but it's really pushing understanding. And then from then we can look at who are the beneficiaries of either of our programs and how can we work towards making sure that both programs can really be beneficial. Because let's be honest, we are tiny organizations in a country of 60 million people. So there could never be enough interventions created towards a better and a thriving creative industries. So it is really about an organized effort in understanding where we play and how we could complement each other instead of literally just collaborating. I suppose collaboration can mean a lot of different things.
I love what Marcus is saying there. And I was also just going to say the importance of complementarity, right? And that would arise out of understanding. I mean, I think there's something that duplication tells you. If there are a lot of similar seeming programs or similar seeming organizations, it's because there is response to a very real need. And I think that's important information and important feedback. So it's... I'm
going to ask a question, right? There's often, and I come from a corporate background and I understand the creative space. And I always believe in having honest, candid conversations. When we say there is duplications because there's a real need, and often it is a need from the organization that's benefiting itself, or is there an actual need from the people that are in need of support? I mean, so that's an honest question we need to actually ask ourselves.
So for an example, if I'm just thinking back to 5 years ago when we started Flying House, we knew that we were duplicating or kind of duplicating something that already existed in Cape Town, but it didn't exist here, right? So we wanted to do something here. I'm thinking of the Theatre Arts Admin, Cape Town. And we got funding from Arts Culture Trust, in fact, to start to, sort of get the idea going. And it was in response to a need for a support structure for creatives, a kind of a hub, a kind of an artist-led organization. And then 5 years down the line, there's actually, it seems to me, quite a few organizations that have come about, micro or maybe, programs that have come about that are responding to that same need. And that's awesome, because we were a group of artists who maybe wanted to then shift and adapt and do something more specialized, right? So I think this idea of, it's another sort of principle of ecosystems thinking, is adaptability and being able to respond to the needs. And that, again, that comes out of what Marcus is saying about understanding.
What I'm hearing is the fact that there are multiple organizations doing largely similar sort of service offering. And the question would thereafter be is how effective, and are they actually having the desired impact for the people that they're wanting to serve? But I'm not even going to go there to get an answer to that question. The challenge that we face as a country is the fact that there's a high levels of unemployment, the fact that especially people in the creative sector is battling to put food on the table. And this is a likely reality that could possibly continue for a bit longer. And as effective, conscientious people in this room have led organizations, have started effective businesses, I would love for us to walk away today to go, okay, what is it that we could do? Because I believe one person can actually make an impact and drive a meaningful change. But coming together of leaders like yourself, I think we could agree a concept, an idea, and implement it to actually have a more impactful effect on the creative space. My next question is, there's an acknowledgement that there's multiple organizations, there's an acknowledgement, there's duplication, there's acknowledgement, there's a need for duplication, and there's an acknowledgement there's some duplication is unnecessary. So that said and put aside, what is it that you could do right now, Marcus, that could have an positive impact in helping the creatives in ways that they need support in?
Yes. Look, I'm a firm believer in collaboration, and I think collaboration can really be translated in a lot of different facets. But what I could do right now is to really have a meeting with, or create a platform for all, change makers in the industry to come together and have an understanding of how they are offering services to the sector. We must always remind ourselves that every organization that is in existence today that works in the creative sector that is focusing on development is because there's a passion for the betterment of the sector. There's a passion for the upliftment of the creatives as practitioners, as contributors, and more than anything else, as community members in our societies. So it is really in how do we come together in a much more open dialogue way to understand where we sit within the ecosystem and how we then can work within the programs that we've developed individually, how we can work towards a more concerted effort of less duplication, because I think that duplication is not always in the programs, but in other cases the duplication is in the beneficiaries. And that is something that a lot of us have not really talked about, is that we sometimes have the same participants in the different programs of the different organizations. So it's how do we avoid having that kind of duplication so that we could have a much broader reach of the sector.
Oh, Marcus, that is phenomenal. Thank you. I do appreciate the fact that this is something that you could start championing and driving, but clearly not on your own. We would support you from a BASA perspective as well to ensure the success of this initiative. I like the fact that you've mentioned there's a need for the duplication and these organizations are clearly passionate. But what really drives me is the fact that, and the reason that I'm trying to extract this level of what we can do is because we need to start doing things slightly differently to sort of adapt, and using Tamara's word, in the ecosystem that we find ourselves in, right? Because it's not business as usual anymore. We need to work together to be able to have the greater impact that we're all looking for. And so people can start generating income and having knowledge outside just the business acumen. Because I think sometimes some of the programs that we need to start offering, and Tamara, I'm going to not suggest some of the programs. With your research, maybe you want to share some insights as to what other programs we can start offering outside of the business support and financial support.
Well, I mean, the one word that just keeps coming up for me is innovation. And I think that, you know, beneficiaries, and I'm again thinking from micro-organization points of view, beneficiaries need to be able to innovate, fail, prototype, and experiment. And I think that, you know, very often when we're measuring impact, we're measuring in ways that are one of the biggest impacts of any kind of program, arts-based program, that is often not captured in monitoring and evaluation data is relationships, and relationships that last long times, and partnerships, right? And if I think about, you know, all of the programs that I've been involved with throughout my career, the most sort of valuable capital really is the relationships that I've formed, whether that's from conferences or from residencies or working on productions. And so I think at the moment there's really a strong need for a mind shift, and I think it is happening, away from this kind of territorial way of operating. As many, you know, many artists are coming from a scarcity scenario at the moment, and a survival mode. And so there's something that goes along with being able to experiment and innovate that would I think help shift that.
Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done, and clearly we need to get like-minded people to actually champion and drive this, to be able to make that difference and the impact that we were looking for in this particular industry, right? Marcus, I like the stuff that you've indicated, that you're going to bring like-minded people together and we're going to support you on that. What else can we actually be doing? Because we cannot afford a silo mentality, especially when we have limited resources, and resources in terms of time, energy, and money, right? In addition to those resources, what else do you think the industry actually needs?
Well, I think the one area that is really kind of lacking is our lobbying power. And I think we have a lot of creatives that are forming quite a number of groups right now in response to the lack of support. And sometimes we translate that support to money, but the support is really in lobbying, in understanding how we can influence government's role in nurturing and enabling the sector in a positive way. And I think that beyond just the skills development, beyond just collaborating between each other within the programs that we have, is how can we, as development agents, lobby for the creative sector to be seen as a valuable contributor to the well-being of our people, of the population. And we can do that. I mean, you know, right now it's a lot of lone voices that speak, and it's a lot of anger that's driven out there, but we are in a position that we can do it in a much more cohesive and possibly a much more level-headed way. I'm not implying in any way that the groups that are out there are not level-headed, but I think that we need all of us to put our heads together and say, how can we make a difference in the thinkers and the policymakers of our society?
Sure. I think you make a very, very good point from a lobbying perspective. But what I've in my experience, and if I might share, once you've actually got the industry that's aligned in terms of value, in terms of effort, in terms of where you're heading, and there's consensus, it's actually very easy to go and speak with a unified voice. And I think there's work needs to be done on that level first, and understanding and mapping out who does what, why do you do it, how do you have impact, and how many lives that you actually supported and created value for. And once that research and all of that is done, I think it's easier to actually move to the next level with absolute confidence and commitment as an industry to lobby with a unified voice to get the desired outcomes. Right? If there is fragmentation, from what I'm hearing, Marcus, your desire to be able to win and negotiate at the level that you want to is not going to be very successful. And being a lobbyist myself in the Economic Forum, I can actually share my insights with you. And once we've established that, I'm happy to lend any support that's required to go and do the lobbying or skills or whatever's desired from that perspective. So I've noted your point, and what I'm driving towards is to start the agenda for that meeting of collective voices coming together to understand and what is it that we can have an impact and move forward with, and thereafter deploy the resources to have the greatest impact. Because often, and I've seen it in various sectors, the most ineffective use of resources is when people don't understand why they're doing what and what the desired outcomes is and how best to actually meet the desired outcomes. In the absence of that thorough knowledge across the industry, we will actually battle to make the desired inroads, reduce the unemployment rates, ensure more people put food on the table, ensure that the well-being of our creative sector is top of mind. And that's largely been my experience. I'm always sharing views and opinions. I'm happy to be opposed. I'm happy to be challenged, or set the record straight if this is not a fair account of where we are currently. So Tamara, have a go at me if you're willing.
I don't want to have a go at you at all. I think you're saying a lot of important things, but and it's actually really lovely to hear, from a what's your background, economics, because I think part of that lobbying is we don't speak enough in interdisciplinary or cross-sectoral ways. I would love to be able to make the case for creativity, collaboration, communication, all those important, what we're all calling 21st century skills, and we're all sort of saying how important these are. And are we saying them to the right people? Are people really, it's also about how we're able to communicate, and who to, and who's listening, and yeah.
Tamara, thank you for that. The goal of this conversation today was just to have a conversation, to get a feel of the room, to see what the real challenges are. And I'm going to ask the question, this is an industry that's been alive for a long, long period of time, right? Why is it that we have not been able to build a successful lobbying structure? And I'm going to ask Marcus this question. What was limiting factors that limited the progress of a successful lobbying thing, Marcus?
That's a very difficult question to answer, Charmaine, but I will put it to you this way. The culture of the cultural and creative industries existence has been on dependence on funding. And that funding has been driven largely by government bodies and also by government-funded institutions. And so we've created en masse creatives that have not seen themselves beyond short-term thinking, funding that has to be spent within a certain period of time. We have not created individuals that think beyond 1 year or 2 year or 3 year, long term. And so that has been really the kind of handicap that the sector has had. I think the most important thing for us to do in order to be able to move forward is to educate our creative industry practitioners of the power of their own existence. Because from that,
oh, that's beautiful.
From that power of their own existence, they'd be able to then translate it into how to really create the kind of impact that will be noticeable outside of the creative sector. Because right now we're really quite insular. We're really quite separated from the rest of the world in our thinking, in our creative nature. As Tamara was saying, she would love to really engage with people from different types of industries within South Africa. And I think if we educate ourselves that we are beyond just that 1 year grant, then we will be able to make a difference.
Those are some powerful statements that you landed, Marcus. I really appreciate it. And it's something that we need to build on in terms of how we move forward in an effective way. I just love what you've actually said, to be quite honest, because, I mean, when you truly collaborate or truly partner, right, what we do is actually bring the best out of everyone. And once we bring the best voices into the room and understanding, and we build the trust element, it's so easy to actually drive that desired impact and change that most people see, but very few people actually realize because of not understanding themselves and not having the confidence to drive what they need to, or that scarcity mindset, or if I give, there's not enough for me. So what I'm hearing, there is so much for us to actually do from a collaborative point of view. And if we all in this room commit to doing what it takes, and we can't fix and change everything, but between us, we can actually agree what are the 2 or 3 things that we can actually drive, and just drive that. And as soon as progress and people see progress, we'll be able to bring more people on board to understand the value and benefit for each of us, not just a few. I am going to ask you guys if you have anything else that you would actually want to land. Tamara, your final points?
Perhaps just to come back to the idea of duplication and maybe just to encourage us to look at duplication in a different way. In other words, it's not necessarily a negative thing, but it's something that is giving us information about what the need is. And then I would really just love to emphasize what Marcus was saying about really needing to understand what those micro players, beneficiaries are doing on the ground, and how to strengthen them, and what makes each of them unique, and how to strengthen the connections and partnerships between them. And I think the same could be happening on a program level.
Thank you, Tamara. I appreciate those closing points. We have actually come to the end of our discussion. So Marcus, I'm going to give you a minute to close out and land your final points, please.
But thank you so much. I mean, very similarly to what Tamara is saying, I think there is a greater need for us to understand who the players are from a macro level, from a micro level, from an emerging artist level, and then also understanding what we offer as agents, development agents ourselves, but also on a greater scale or on a bigger level for ourselves, is that we need to empower the creatives with knowledge that they have so much to offer the sector beyond immediate gratification. And once we can do that, and I think that's what I would like to start doing first, is how do we empower the creatives to realize their power of their own existence. And once they do that, we'll be able, the other stuff will be much easier to unpack.
I love that. And Marcus and I will give you my personal support to help you, because one of the foundations I work with actually helps people understand who am I. Because once you're centered and you understand who you are and what you have to offer, it's very easy to go out and offer it and monetize it thereafter. Indeed. So you have my personal support to help you with that. Thank you, guys. I really, really enjoyed the insights. Clearly, there's work to be had, and clearly there's stuff that we need to work on. But the conversation has just highlighted a few of the challenges and how we could potentially move forward. Well, I think we did actually achieve the intention of today's talk, which was to emphasize the need for a bit more collaboration, prompt thought around exploring and knowing individual and organizational strengths and thoughts, and just understand what the limitations are. And finally, I believe if we attract the ideal or the right partners to collaborate, we can grow and amplify the desired outcomes, not just in this sector, but for South Africa as a whole. Thank you, Tamara and Marcus, for your insightful and robust discussion. and to our partner, British Council, for making these important conversations possible. I just want to share before we close out, and one of the recent impactful collaborations that Business and Arts South Africa was involved in was the creation of the song Rise South Africa. And the intention behind that song was to actually unify South Africans to achieve multiple objectives. And this is a collaboration between BASA, the AA, and Ruth Springs. And the point I want to actually land is, when we look at things from a not a narrow vision, but a broad vision, there's so much that we could potentially do for just not for the creative sector, but for South Africa that could benefit the creative sector. So the CEO from the AA was in Spain yesterday, and he played the song with visuals about the South African tourism opportunities. And it was seen there, and people were moved by the song, but also what it did do is encourage people to come visit South Africa. So if our tourism industry grows, our crafters, our artists, everybody else would be able to sell and make more money. So when we do whatever we do, we look at what is it we could do, not for self, but for community and country. Everybody wins. So on that point, thank you, Tamara and Marcus. I loved your insights. To all our listeners, thank you for hanging with the BASA crew and guests. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms for the details of our upcoming podcasts and our exciting projects. And now I have to say, this is a wrap. Thank you, everyone.